Hey gang, Kevin here, Life22, and we are on another episode. And today, what we are reviewing is Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Now, I've actually spoken to a couple customers of mine, and I was like, "You really need to read this book if you're investing in rental properties, whatever." I can't believe that I'm just reading this book, and I got in touch with Robert. I got introduced to Robert Kiyosaki through a Sunday special one-on-one interview he did with Ben Shapiro, and so I got to like it. What he was saying made a lot of sense. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to add his book to my list, and I had a lot of other books in front of it, so I just got around to it. But and a lot of you'd be surprised how many of my clients were like, "Oh, I've heard of him," or one of my buddies was like, "No, I mean, where have you been? I read his book back in like the early 2000s." And I bought his game, and I did, I've read 3 of his books, and blah, 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 and I've gone to in-person seminars and lectures. I was like, really? And I was like, how come I'm just hearing of this guy? And a lot of what he said in that interview made a lot of sense, right? Like, I don't keep my money in money, right? Like, what's the purpose of having money? Why would I buy something and then sell it to try to make some money when money isn't really worth anything? Because money is worth nothing when the government can just print a million of it. But the value of a house will always, it kind of gives you a different perspective, right? Like the value of a house or the value of gold, its dollar, what it equates to in the U.S. dollar, may increase, but that's only because the value of the dollar is constantly fluctuating, typically decreasing because of inflation. So it's one of those things. It's like, okay, so what is your labor worth if you're never constantly updating its price compared to the inflation rate of the American dollar, right? What is your, he goes, the government can't print houses. The government can't print cows. So I own cow farms and beef farms. And he goes, the government can't print houses. So I own real estate. And those different things continually generate cash flow, which is used then at the current market value, and then his goal is to then reinvest it into something else the government can't print, at which point it would hold its value, because real estate always holds its value. Now it fluctuates in relation to the American dollar, but a house is always worth a house, right? Depends on its location. It depends on how well it's maintained. It depends on the size of the house. There's different amenities for what a house is worth, but if you could think of it in a universal unit that isn't the U.S. dollar, what is that worth? And what can it generate from there as well as worth? So, and a lot of those things that he was talking about in his one-on-one interview with Ben was like awesome. And I listened to that in the fall. Maybe it was like October, November, or December, somewhere in there. And then so I had added the book to the list, and I just finished reading it a week ago, and I'm almost actually done with his follow-up book to the Rich Dad Poor Dad series, which is the next one in order, which is the financial quadrants. And he kind of talks about how you divvy up into. We'll go into that when we get to that book. And once I'm done with that book, I'll review that book, and then there's a 9-minute children's story from the 50s that he recommended that you listen to, and it was like $1 on Audible. So I'll be listening to that and seeing what lessons he took from it and applying them, and then doing a review on that little book as well. That one was called Stone Soup. So, but just really cool stuff. So in the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book, which led off his series, which I believe he wrote in 95, if I remember correctly, 97, I think it was 95. So he dedicates the book. Obviously, we go through some of the chapters. He introduces his rich dad and his poor dad, with his rich dad being his high school dropout, his friend Mike's father, who was a high school dropout and ended up owning a chain of grocery stores, ended up owning most of the real estate in Hawaii where he grew up, and then he talks about his poor dad, which is his well-educated father who worked for his actual father who worked for the education department of Hawaii, and how he ended up dying in debt and all these other things where there was so much wealth left behind by his rich dad, like it was unfathomable. So. In chapter 1, how the rich don't work for money. Chapter 2, why teach financial literacy. Chapter 3 is mind your own business. So The first one, the rich don't work for money. Money works for them, right? So they invest into things, and those things make money. Otherwise, you're in the rat race. You're a slave to the system. The system, you have to work for your entire life. The system is not designed so that you go to work, you save money, and then you retire someday, because the system, it's just not that way. And then he gets into the next chapter, which is why I teach financial literacy, which is something that, like, most kids don't understand this. Most kids don't understand finances, and you don't understand it till later on in life. And then you trust people, and he goes into this in his next book in greater detail. But you're trusting your investments. So you might not know that much about investments. Instead of doing the research, you become lazy and you want to spend more time with your family and blah blah blah. So you entrust all of that information to professionals for that information, and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to give this money to my stockbroker, and he's going to invest in good stocks or a portfolio or whatever. And they're just employees of a major corporation that don't make money if they make you money. They make money if they convince you to give them your money, so that they have money to spend and spread around. And so what ends up happening is their incentive structure, they're not typically, most of them are just not really good at investing. So it's like, why would you trust your money with somebody who's just as investment savvy as you are? And and there's a lot of accountants out there that, when he says in the book, he's like, the more money you make, the more money you pay in taxes, because most of the time people don't people work, and the highest the highest tax bracket is for people who are in the E quadrant, which is employment and self-employment, not people who own businesses, who own corporations, who own stocks and bonds. So yeah, sure, there's extra incentives for the employee quadrant people. Your average day Joe who works 9 to 5, and maybe starts littering out, starts growing his family by getting more kids and getting married and all these other things. The incentives go up, but but so does the tax bracket. And there's certain parameters that, like, it doesn't behoove you, if you will, to be in that district in the first place. You get less of those incentives if you're making a lot more money in the investment market, but you pay a lot lower tax rate and you could be making more money. So it comes down to, like, they're incentivizing people to stay as employees and workers, and you know what I mean? And most people will be stuck in the rat race, and I guess that's what it is. But they talk about how financial institutions, schools, the educational institution does not teach financial literacy and how to get out of that rat race and how to achieve financial freedom. Because financial freedom is not just having a good job that pays a good wage and benefits. Those are perks, but you don't achieve financial freedom that way. You will always continue to work until the day you die. And he talks later, I believe he talks later in the book about different things. What's one of the things that he talks about is, how the government's constantly robbing the Social Security income, and how, like, it's going to be bankrupt in a few years. And I think we all know that, but it's like, it was created because people are not financial literate enough to save for their retirement funds. And actually, it's not until his second book he talks about how piss poor 401ks are, and how a lot of that stuff is antiquated and will be dropped on its face in the coming generations. And it's gonna collapse, or it's gonna modify into something slightly newer, but it's not going to still be caught up with the current wave of retirement savings. And it's funny that it's like the average Joe doesn't know that. They just follow whatever policy they've got with their company has, and they just kind of make their way through it. And it's just, I don't know, it's a pile of nonsense. But so why teach financial literacy? So that you can achieve financial independence, and that you don't have to worry about money. You can make your money work for you, and then you can be free from the rat race to do the things that you are passionate about doing, the things that you want to do. So, chapter 3 is mind your own business. That actually has to do with the fact that you pay somebody else to mind your business for you, right? And then like the financial stock traders and bankers and accountants and investment portfolio experts and all these other who not really experts for a lot of them. So instead of you minding your business or keeping an eye on your business, you mind other people's businesses, and you don't pay attention to your own business, or you mind someone else's business by minding the store, and you are the employee at the grocery store, right? And that's, you're minding somebody else's business and you're getting paid for it, but it's not for you. And they could never truly pay you what you could be making on your own with your own business. And it's very cool stuff that he teaches here. So the history of taxes and the power of corporations. That was a cool theory, and I guess I never realized that, like, I've been kind of making these moves myself with my different personal businesses and stuff like that, and never really thought about it as much as I thought it was more of a liability savings, right? But you don't think about certain things that, like, a company is entitled to, right? Like, your employer, you can say, I want you to give us, health insurance, and maybe we have a discount for, our membership for ourselves and our families for the YMCA, or, gym memberships to stay healthy, and you know what I mean? And those, if you own your own company, obviously you got to be making money with your company. You can't just spend until, like, you go into bankruptcy, but you can say, hey, listen, the management or any official employees or the owner of the business is entitled to a gym membership, or is entitled to a news subscription, right? Dentist offices, they have, like, magazines and stuff. Automotive shops, they have, car magazines and stuff in the waiting room, and all these different things. So, like, why couldn't you have those kinds of benefits, which is kind of handy, right? So you go to work as an as an employee for somebody. You go to work, and you go out every day, and you go show up at your work, and yada yada. And then at the end of the day, they take the government takes their taxes out, which is probably going to be your biggest expense throughout the year. And then you turn around and you go home, and then you have to pay for your groceries and your rent or mortgage and your car insurance and all these other items after they've taken all their taxes out. Okay, and then you buy your gym membership and all these other things. But if you own a company, you own a corporation, whether it's a limited liability company, whether it's a partnership, it's some form of an entity, you can say, well, no, the vehicle is, I use it for work, right? So you don't work, you don't drive to, obviously you'd have a personal car and a corporate car, but then your corporate car can be used for work. Your gym membership could be paid for work. So now all of a sudden it's coming off of your revenue as an expense, but then at the end of the year, when they look at how much money's left, your profit, that's what they tax. So you got to subtract out all these other expenses that you would have bought post-taxes for yourself. And so you're lowering your tax bill because it's an expense of the company, right? It's your company. You can run it however you want. The government can't dictate that, I always joked with a friend of mine about this, because he was like, I would love to have, like, chickens. I have chickens. And I was like, well, no, you know what you could do? You could say that the employees of the company, or the CEO of the company, or the owner of the company is entitled to farm fresh eggs. So the company now can also have an expense for chickens, the feed for the chickens, the dog that guards the chickens from predators, the vet bill for the dog, any expenditures that are related to the chickens, the collection fee, any employment or labor used for the chickens. All that stuff can be written off as a tax write-off, or as an expenditure of the company. And then you turn around and provide the owner with farm fresh eggs, because that is one of the forms of payment to the owner, is farm fresh eggs. So that's one way of doing it. For example, like, the government can't tell you that the owner's not entitled to farm fresh eggs. It's right there. It's right there in this agreement, this memorandum from the CEO, that all shareholders or all employees are entitled to farm fresh eggs. Doesn't matter if your business is eggs or not. You go to Friendship Dairies, they give their employees special sales discounts. They can buy milk. I think they given like 2 gallons a week or something like that for free. Whatever it is, I'm not really 100% sure, but I know that there is some sort of discount. I know at Cutco, their employees are entitled to like, so many free knives a year, and such a discount at the second store, and like, such a discount at the main store for the lifetime warranty stuff. Um, you know, Things like that. There are certain perks that any company can decide to do. They can decide not to do it and save the money as profit, or they can do it. And why would you keep the money as profit if you can increase morale? Morale, to be able to increase it, is almost unquantifiable in a lot of industries. You can't quantify the ability to to boost your own morale. And if that's paying for some chickens to be, you know what I mean? So it is what it is, right? If that's to give out some of your free merchandise from Cutco or Case Cutlery, or you're giving out milk at the dairy, or maybe you get $10 worth of groceries because you work at the local grocery store. Maybe that's how they boost morale with their employees. Cost of eggs are going up. We're going to give you 50% off of eggs if you're an employee here. Like, the company gets to write that off. They get to boost their morale too. So like, there's a benefit here. And if you're just a single owner entity, like, there should be no difference. Well, that's a loophole and blah blah blah. Well, guess what? Loopholes aren't illegal. And by them filling in loopholes, then all they're doing is driving companies overseas. Because why would I make money in America? Why would I make money in a state? That's why people move to states without income tax. Why would you move to all these different places to get away from these money-grubbing politicians who take your money and then they line their pockets with them mostly, and then use them on programs that you don't... It's your charity, right? Like, if I want to donate to charity, I will. I don't need the government to hand out soup at the soup kitchen. That's my responsibility, if I see fit, to go and volunteer at my local church that would set up the soup kitchen and the food pantry, right? It's not the government's responsibility for that. And that's one of the... So anyways, not to defend that as much as anything else, I guess. But the rich invent money. And I believe, like, they take something, they have an idea, right, and it creates a business, and that business generates money, and then that money then is used to create jobs, so employees can run that business and stuff like that. And so they're stuck in the rat race. But without that person that had the investment into this thing that then created these jobs, like, that's... Let's eat all the rich. Well, guess what? Then there's no jobs, because they're the ones who are buying the businesses, or have the idea to create the business that creates the job that these people work for. So, I mean, they could... work to learn, don't work for money. So that was a good point that he had, that, like, you should work to understand certain aspects of your business. You should work to learn different things that will make you more money, but don't work for money. I'm going to go to work, put my time in exchange for money. That is, he says, he goes, the rich have money work for them, poor work for their money. So you need to get money and make wise business decisions, be financially literate, and then you can achieve financial independence. He also talked about being broke versus being poor. Being poor is forever, because it's your mentality. Being broke is temporary. So chapter 7 is overcoming obstacles. So that's part of, like, you're learning, you're adjusting, you're being thrown, stuff is being thrown at you. Turning failure into success is something that he really harps on in this book, and that's the difference. I believe it was this book, he talked about his rich dad saying that he loved Texans. He loves Texans. Everything's bigger in Texas. Even their failures and how their attitude, how everything is bigger in Texas, their failures, they use them. It's not that they're bigger failures, it's that their failures they utilize and create a big lesson from, a reminder of how they turn failure into success. And failure is a learning opportunity. So failure is not failure. Failure is a learning experience, and success is success. So there is no failure, right? Everybody wins. That's You can't just be down on your luck, be depressed, and woe is me, I'm the victim, because you're not going to get anywhere. You're always going to be the victim, and I guess at that point you're a loser. Um, so, yeah, he talks about, and then he says, remember the Alamo, how they were outnumbered, they fought and died, and they fought an uphill battle, knowing they were going to die, but they fought nonetheless, and that was another reason that he loved Texans. And he said, and then they put it up, in addition to it being a tourist attraction that makes San Antonio, Texas, very, very high levels of profit every year in terms of revenue generation from it being a tourist attraction. It's also a very good symbol about overcoming obstacles and never backing down and not letting failure determine your future. And that was pretty cool. Chapter 8 is getting started. So it kind of explains how you can get started, things like that. Chapter 9, you still want more. Here's some to-dos, and then he gives you some final thoughts. And this was a really good book. And then after talking to my friend, I looked into the game Cash Flow. So I ended up ordering Cash Flow for kids, and me and the kids played it last night, and it was pretty cool. They're 6 and 7, almost 7 and 8. So the 4-year-old didn't play for very long. He wasn't really getting it, but the kids were able to. It was a good way to kind of teach the kids. And then, from what I'm gathering between Cash Flow and Monopoly, I mean, those are the two games that'll keep your kids sharp and stuff like that. And I guess I missed the wave, because in the 90s and the early 2000s was when everybody was into Rich Dad Poor Dad. So I'm getting to the table like a couple decades late, but it's. I guess there was like Cash Flow clubs around the country and stuff. I'm after playing the game last night for the kids version, I am going to try to go out and get the adult Cash Flow game set and try it for adults. So I think that'll be pretty cool. You're never too old to learn financial literacy, and you can never it's never a waste of time for you to hone your skills. So with that said, that was Rich Dad Poor Dad, and we did the celebrating the 20 years. So there was obviously some updates in this version, with updates for today's world and 9 new study lessons and sections. And there was study sessions that came with a companion PDF that they give you with the Audible version of the 20th anniversary edition. Things like that. I want to say it was like an 8.5, 9-hour read, something like that. Listen, so it's very well worth it. This book, you could tell because I was so excited. I ran out and bought the Cash Flow for Kids for my kids, and I jumped right into a second book. And I'm like, I think I got 3 hours left on that. So you'll be hearing another one from me in the next few days. So on that note, guys, we'll catch you next time on Life22. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and continue to send your hate mail because we appreciate it.